Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, a product came out a little while ago, a product that I was looking forward to checking out when it finally came out, and that is the Genesis system from Fantasy Flight Games, which is essentially the engine that runs their Star Wars, Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, Force and Destiny line of games. And it's funny, I became intrigued with the mechanic of that particular system as people were explaining it. Just wasn't necessarily sure if I wanted to play Star Wars, which may be a little funny to people because if you look back there, I've got all this Star Wars stuff. It's not my favorite genre in the entire world. I just started collecting a few Star Wars items, and it became kind of a funny thing. I have nothing against playing Star Wars, but I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to invest that much money and time in getting the Fantasy Flight game Star Wars line, because I was really interested in how that mechanic worked. Now, I'm not going to bash it or anything. I haven't actually gotten picked up the product itself, but I've seen some reviews, and a lot of people had kind of mentioned that pretty much what it is Star Wars with the serial numbers filed off. So if you already own that particular game, there's no reason to grab that system. And this is not bashing that game or anything. I'm looking forward at this point to picking up the PDF when that gets released. The actual book is available now, I believe. So I'm not going to say anything bad about it, but it brings up the subject of generic systems. And generic systems are, this is a subject that is like near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of friends that are completely against generic systems. They believe the system and the game, the setting, everything else should go hand in hand. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I am just a fan of, once you've learned a system, if you find a system and you like the system, I instantly start thinking, as I'm reading whatever game happens to be on my shelf here, and even the games that I grew up with, I learn the mechanic, I learn how the game works, and I instantly start thinking, well, what else could I use this for? And if I wanted to use it outside of this world, outside of this setting, maybe even outside of this genre. And, you can be one of those people that decides that you find a system and you believe that system can do everything, which I don't believe is true. And, why not? I think part of, what it boils down to is various mechanics, which you can lump into the system. They're good at emulating certain feels. They don't necessarily emulate fantasy or science fiction or cyberpunk or whatever, but they emulate certain feels within that, or certain genres or subgenres. And so we'll take this Fantasy Flight, Genesis. It seems to be really good at emulating pulp heroics, because look at Star Wars. It's pulp heroics. Specifically, what that system seems to be really good at is giving you a success with a threat, or a failure with some kind of advantage, and so it constantly propels the story forward. When you're succeeding, there's always an oh crap moment, and when you're failing, there's always like, oh but hey, this other neat thing happened, and that's just the way the probabilities of those die rolls work. So using that system, doing something else with it, it's always going to suggest or create that kind of feel, regardless of what you want. And what your intention was going into it. So using a system like that, that's not bad, but it's going to create that kind of feel. And it's funny. I have looked at other systems that are seductively elegant. I loved reading about Fate, and I'm not saying anything bad about Fate. I have not yet played games using Fate. I really want to do that. However, if you look at if you run the mechanics, or run the numbers rather on the mechanic, it becomes very evident to you that people succeed a lot. That there's not a lot of failure involved in this game, and when there is, you're always failing forward. And I'm not knocking it, but it's going to produce a certain kind of feel, and that's not necessarily the feel I want all the time. I enjoyed checking out 7th Sea, the first edition, and I'm still hot to play that, although it's very obvious when you read that it's going to produce this very heroic feel. Playing a lot of games that I have, that are powered by Ubiquity, that's there's no generic system for that either, and I don't necessarily think they need to make a generic system. I think every once in a while I've heard talk of Jeff Combos maybe making a 2nd edition, generic system, and I don't want them to, because I like the way it works right now. But once again, that's going to produce a kind of pulp heroics. It's going to be a little bit different. You know, just looking at it, than the feel you're going to get with the Star Wars, the Genesis type system, because it's not going to necessarily give you that success with threat or failure with advantage sort of mojo that's going to happen with the Genesis or Star Wars type thing. It's a different type of pulp heroics. It's not as heroic as the roll and keep system that powers first edition 7th. And you look at right now, I'm looking at Powered by the Apocalypse. In fact, I'm going to be playing a Powered by the Apocalypse game. You know, once again, that's a really seductively elegant little system, but it tends to produce a certain feel. You know, and certainly, you know, you look at like Fate, you look at Powered by the Apocalypse, you look at Savage Worlds, and those systems have been adapted across multiple genres. It's not necessarily that you can't do different genres with a generic system, but they're always going to produce a certain feel. And, you know, in Powered by the Apocalypse, you can always already kind of tell. I can already tell, like, there is that certain element of failing forward, which is not bad, but it's a little bit. And then there's other things that Powered by the Apocalypse, you know, the way the mechanics tend to work. I'm you know, it'll save my judgment for actually playing it. Tend to suggest things are going to happen in a particular way. And even look at my old standby way back in the day. You know, you play a lot of I have a lot of games on my shelf that are powered by. I'm not going to call it D20 system, because D20 is really, you know, the open game license. That's 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. The D20 system is what it is. The Pathfinder, the D20 Modern, the D20 Star Wars, the D20 whatever. That produces a certain feel, and the feel is, well, we'll go with D20 Modern first, or, you know, D20 Pathfinder. That tends to produce a sort of zero to hero, very fast progression to hero, and it involves a lot of sub-mechanics and a lot of, I don't want to say math, but, you know, it's a lot of bonuses and blah, 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 you know, whatever it is. And that's the type of feel it always tends to produce. The old school games, they produce a different kind of level of zero to hero type thing. But, you know, look at it, there's a certain percentage of time that you fail, especially in the lower levels, in those old versions of Dungeons and Dragons, or things powered by, you know, the kind of wonky system that I grew up with and love. Where there's a much you're not succeeding as much. You're not failing forward in that game an awful lot. You know, it's a different vibe. It's a different feel. I love that system. You can use it for all kinds of stuff, such as Dark Places and Demogorgons uses a very, you know, close, you know, with some tweaks of that system. But you're not necessarily. It's not going to be pulp heroics. Is the bottom line. The system is going to produce what it produces every single time, regardless of what genre you try to shoehorn it into. This is not a bad thing, and I could go on and on about like percentile-based things. Got to pick up some BRP, but it's a percentage-based system. I've read how it works. It's percentages, but you know, every single one of those games, just based on how you advance, on and especially on what the probabilities are, instantly produce a certain feel. I am going back to the original thing that prompted this video discussion. You know, I am really still hot to check out the Genesis system, because there's something about that where it's not really based on a lot of numbers. It's more based on you being able. It's more abstract. Really, really intrigues me. It's really something I want to use. I'm just not sure if I want to use it for Star Wars. So I am probably kind of the target audience for that system, because I'm thinking, well, what else could I possibly use this for? The caveat to any kind of generic system, or yanking your favorite system from some other game, and deciding I want to play this other genre with this because I really like this system, is it's always going to produce a certain feel. You know, you can tweak a little bit. You can do, you know, whatever you want to with it in terms of, you know, are we going to use ray guns? Are we going to use magic? Or what kind of, you know, all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, whether it's Worlds of Darkness, or you know, the Vampire, etc., or whatever, always going to produce a certain feel. And it's just based on how the dice mechanics work, based on how the progression works. You're always going to kind of get that. So just be aware of that. So there is, end of the day, I don't believe there is a generic system that can do everything. But there are generic systems out there, or you can yank a system out of an existing product that will produce maybe an effect that you want. But it's not enough just to be comfortable with it. It's being repetitive here, but you have to know what kind of effect it's going to produce. So that's it. I'm just babbling now. So have a good one, kids.